Today, I invite you to listen to a story that begins with a single, shattering sentence. Right in front of his entire family, he screamed, "My mother comes first. If you can't live with it, then get out." The words struck me like a shard of glass, tearing my world apart. But instead of crying or running away, I stood tall, looked my husband directly in the eye, and said with finality, "Then I invite you and your mother to leave my house." That very moment ignited a fierce family war, exposing truths no one could have ever imagined. If you wish to uncover the story behind this declaration, please settle in and listen. My name is Clara, and I'm 33 years old. I grew up in an ordinary family in a quiet Midwestern town. My father passed away from an illness when I was young, and my mother raised me on her own, running a small, beloved diner at the edge of the local market. Because of this, I've always cherished the value of a warm home and dreamed of a peaceful family life. But I suppose life rarely gives you everything you wish for. My story begins on a day that seemed perfectly normal, but it would become the detonator for all the tragedies that followed. I married Ethan after knowing him for 2 years. Initially, Ethan was kind, gentle, and composed, which made me believe he was the safe harbor I had been searching for. On our wedding day, everyone offered their blessings, and I truly thought my future would be filled with warmth and love. However, shortly after we were married, a stark reality began to emerge. Ethan was a man excessively attached to his mother. It's no exaggeration to say that in his eyes, his mother was everything, number one, and his wife was merely a latecomer. At first, I thought it was admirable for a son to be so devoted, but his devotion slowly morphed into a crippling dependency, turning me into an outsider in my own home. My mother-in-law, Brenda, is in her early 60s. She was widowed long ago and has only one son, Ethan. Consequently, she showered him with affection and protection, but also controlled him to a suffocating degree. When I first moved in, she treated me with a polite, almost placid demeanor. I silently congratulated myself, thinking I was lucky. But the longer I lived there, the more I felt her scrutinizing gaze. She watched every bite I ate, every step I took, every word I spoke. If I was even a beat too slow, her brow would furrow, and she would make passive-aggressive comments in front of Ethan about how clumsy I was, how I didn't know how to manage a household, and how I wasn't worthy of being his wife or her daughter-in-law. Ethan, hearing this, never defended me. He would either remain silent or give a slight nod, as if to validate his mother's words. My heart would sink, but I tried to endure it, believing that time would help her understand me. I was wrong. One evening, I got home late from work. Traffic was terrible, it was raining, and I had to stop by the grocery store. By the time I walked through the door, dinner wasn't started, and Brenda was already sitting there, waiting, her face a thundercloud. The moment she saw me, she snapped, "This house has one simple expectation for you to have dinner ready, and you can't even manage that. What kind of useless woman are you? When I was married at 18, I handled everything, not like you." I swallowed hard, trying to explain. "Mom, the traffic was backed up for miles. I have all the groceries. I'll start cooking right now." But she wasn't listening. She turned to her son, Ethan, and said, "See? Marrying a woman like this is just bringing another burden into the house." I looked at Ethan, hoping for a word of defense, but he just sighed and said, "Mom has a point." That sentence was a knife straight to my heart. I fell silent, biting my lip to hold back the tears that were welling up. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier. Brenda found fault in everything I did. Sometimes it was because I bought the wrong brand of groceries, other times because I was a few minutes late with the laundry, or because I accidentally dropped a dish. It all became an excuse for her to criticize me. Ethan gradually grew accustomed to it, no longer seeing it as unfair but as a normal part of our lives. I went from being a wife, a woman who longed for love, to a servant in the house I lived in. The breaking point came one evening. As I was setting the table, an old ceramic bowl, a family heirloom, slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. Brenda's eyes widened in fury. "You careless fool!" she shrieked. "That bowl was a gift from your father-in-law. Breaking it is the same as disrespecting his memory." I stammered an apology, explaining it was an accident, but she screamed louder, drawing Ethan into the room. I thought, for once, he might be fair. But no. Ethan looked at me, his eyes cold as ice, and roared, "My mother comes first. If you can't live with it, then get out." I froze. My ears were ringing. All the resentment, the humiliation, the patience I had clung to for so long suddenly shattered like that bowl. But instead of bursting into tears or arguing, I felt a surprising calm wash over me. I took a deep breath, looked my husband directly in the eye, and said slowly, enunciating every word, "Then I invite you and your mother to leave my house." The air in the room turned to ice. Brenda was stunned, and Ethan was speechless. They never expected that a woman who had always been silent and tolerant could utter such a sentence. The house fell into a chilling silence. I stood up and began cleaning the broken pieces, not saying another word, but inside me, a door had closed forever, the door of blind tolerance. I knew, from that moment on, I would no longer be the weak woman who only knew how to endure. A new chapter had begun, and it would decide the fate of all three of us in this house. The moment those words left my mouth, the room fell utterly silent. Brenda sat frozen, her eyes wide and her lips trembling as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Ethan shot up from his chair, his face flushed with rage, veins bulging on his temples. "What did you just say?" he yelled. "Did you just dare to kick my mother out of this house? Are you even human, Clara?" I looked straight into my husband's eyes, my gaze no longer wavering. I spoke slowly but firmly. "Yes. I am inviting you and your mother to leave this house. This house was bought with my mother's life savings, left to me, and is in my name. I have tried to be patient. I have tried to endure, but you both have mistaken my silence for weakness and my patience for cowardice. So today, I am making things clear." Brenda burst into theatrical sobs, a heart-wrenching sound designed to drown me in guilt. "Oh, God!" she wailed. "I raised my son, only for him to marry a woman who throws his mother out on the street. What's the point of living with such shame?" She slammed her hand on the table and pointed a trembling finger at me. "What kind of cruel, heartless daughter-in-law are you, trying to tear a mother and son apart?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, my resolve hardening. I knew those tears weren't for remorse, but were a familiar weapon used to make Ethan take her side. And just as expected, Ethan lunged forward, gripping my shoulders tightly, his voice seething with fury. "You've gone too far, Clara. Don't think you can do whatever you want just because the house is in your name. My mother comes first. She is the master of this house, not you." The pain in my shoulders was sharp, but the pain in my heart from his words was sharper. I didn't scream or fight back. I just looked at him coldly and said, "If you consider your mother the master of this house, then you are both welcome to find another place to live. I will not tolerate another day of this disrespect and humiliation." The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Ethan's ragged breathing, Brenda's choked sobs, and my own stony silence merged into a cacophony that threatened to tear our small house apart. After a moment of wailing, Brenda suddenly changed her tone. She spoke in a whisper, but every word was laced with venom. "Ethan, listen to me. If your wife disrespects us like this, what's the point of keeping her? Divorce her, kick her out. Even if the deed is in her name, this is my son's house. I won't let her live here in peace." Her words were like a slap in the face. She didn't just want to degrade me. She wanted to strip me of the one thing my mother had left me, to leave me with nothing. Ethan, agitated, looked at me with bloodshot eyes and shouted, "You want to kick my mother out? Fine, I'll kick you out first. You don't deserve to be my wife." With that, he hurled a glass of water against the floor, sending shards flying everywhere. I stood my ground, not flinching. In the eye of the storm, I found a strange clarity. "If you want a divorce, fine," I said calmly. "But remember, you have no claim to this house. My mother shed her blood, sweat, and tears for it. I will not let anyone take it, not even you." His face contorted with rage. He raised his hand as if to strike me, but it froze mid-air. Perhaps a flicker of conscience held him back, or maybe he feared the consequences of being known as a man who hits his wife. He lowered his hand, but his voice was a low growl. "Fine, you just wait. I'll show you what it means to lose everything." I looked at him without fear, a cold emptiness spreading through me. The man I had loved for years had become someone willing to destroy me just to protect his own selfishness. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my room, the dim yellow light casting long shadows, as memories flooded my mind. Our first dates, our clumsy confessions of love, the vows we made on our wedding day, it all felt like a long, drawn-out play where I was the one being deceived. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, a powerful resolve surged within me. I knew that if I continued to endure this, I would spend the rest of my life in the shadows of their contempt. I had to stand up. I had to protect myself and my mother's legacy. The next morning, I woke up early and gathered all my important documents: the deed to the house, my personal identification, and a few small savings account passbooks. I hid them securely in a private drawer. I understood that when people are determined to take something, they will stop at nothing. I no longer trusted Ethan, and I certainly didn't trust Brenda. As I was quietly tucking everything away, the bedroom door flew open. Ethan stood there, his eyes still filled with animosity, but there was a hint of hesitation. "Clara," he said, his voice no longer shouting but still harsh. "If you apologize to my mother, if you humble yourself, I'll let this go. If not, don't blame me for what happens." I looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Apologize? I've been patient long enough. I have done nothing wrong that requires an apology. The one who needs to reconsider their actions isn't me." He shot me a furious glare, slammed the door, and left. The entire day was shrouded in a heavy, oppressive silence. Brenda muttered curses under her breath all day, sometimes on the porch, sometimes in the kitchen. Ethan went out and didn't return until late, his face grim. I went about my day quietly, not responding, but I knew a massive storm was brewing. And sure enough, that evening, just as I finished setting the table for dinner, Ethan returned with a strange man who looked like a lawyer. He carried a briefcase, sat down at the table, and said coldly, "Mrs. Miller, Mr. Miller has retained me to handle your divorce proceedings. Here are the papers. If you sign now, everything can be resolved quickly." I looked down at the stack of papers, my heart clenching. They had been preparing this, moving so fast I barely had time to breathe, but I didn't tremble. I raised my head and said calmly, "I will sign, but not today. And let me be clear, this house will never belong to Ethan or Brenda. You can take away the love, you can take away the title of wife, but you will never take this property." The lawyer paused, his eyes assessing me. Ethan jumped to his feet, pointing a finger at my face. "You've got a lot of nerve, Clara. You think you're so smart? You think you can stand up to me and my mother? Fine, just you wait and see." I sat perfectly still, a strange calm settling over me. I knew the real battle had just begun. After the night Ethan brought the lawyer home, the house, already suffocating, felt like it was about to explode. I knew that now that they had shown their hand, their future tactics would have no limits. But I was no longer the woman who only knew how to bow her head in submission. The coldness in my heart had forged itself into a strength that made me acutely aware of every move. The next morning, Ethan left for work early, but before he walked out the door, he shot me a look and threw a parting shot full of insinuation. "Get ready, you're not going to have a moment's peace." Brenda was outside, sweeping the porch, muttering curses just loud enough for me to hear. Ungrateful woman. A mother raises her son, and his wife treats her like dirt. A truly wicked wife. I remained silent. Her words no longer had the power to make me tremble. They only strengthened my resolve to protect what was mine. That afternoon, I was shocked to receive a summons from the court. In his petition, Ethan had filed for divorce on the grounds that I had failed to fulfill my marital duties, had insulted and abused his mother, and had caused serious conflict in the family. I held the paper, my hands shaking not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of their lies. I was the one who had been abused and insulted, yet in their narrative, I had become the villain. I felt a sting in my eyes, but I took a deep breath and told myself, "Don't you cry, Clara. Crying will only make you weaker. You have to stand strong." That evening, Ethan and Brenda came home and dropped all pretense, confronting me directly. The moment she stepped inside, Brenda shouted, "Clara, how much longer are you planning to stay here? My son has filed for divorce. Sooner or later, you'll have to pack your bags. Stop dreaming." I looked at her and replied calmly, "I'm aware, and I will see you in court. But let me repeat, this house does not belong to Ethan, nor does it belong to you. It belongs to me. The deed is in my name, and I will not yield a single inch." Her face contorted with rage. She ground her teeth, her eyes flashing with hatred. She turned to her son. "Ethan, did you hear that? She sees us as parasites living in her house. We can't let this happen." "Absolutely not." Ethan's voice was a low growl. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure she walks away with nothing." In the following days, just as I had predicted, they constantly tried to make my life difficult. It started with snide remarks and hateful glares, but soon escalated. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my scooter, my only mode of transportation, wouldn't start. As I fiddled with it, I discovered that the gas tank had been intentionally drained and the ignition wires were crudely cut. I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I went back inside and faced Ethan. My scooter was vandalized. "Was it you or your mother?" Ethan just shrugged. "Who knows? Maybe you were just careless." Brenda snickered. "It probably just broke down. Don't go making false accusations." I clenched my fists, but didn't lose my temper. I knew my anger would only delight them. I called a mechanic and took a taxi to work, silently adding this act of petty sabotage to my growing list of evidence against them. The ultimate provocation came that weekend. I returned home to find the front door lock had been changed. I stood there, stunned for a moment, then rang the doorbell. Brenda answered, a triumphant smirk on her face. "There's no place for you here anymore. If you want in, call the police." My throat tightened, but I didn't panic. I immediately called a close friend who worked at the local precinct. Within half an hour, a police officer arrived. He checked my ID and the deed, confirmed the house was legally mine, and ordered Brenda to open the door. As she reluctantly handed over the new key, I looked her straight in the eye, my voice as cold as ice. "This is the first time. If it happens again, I will press charges for illegal eviction and trespassing." She trembled with rage but still managed to scream, "You insolent witch! You'll pay for this." That night, when Ethan came home and heard what happened, he flew into a rage. He slammed the table and yelled at me. "You dare threaten my mother? You've gone too far. I won't let you get away with this." I looked at him calmly. "Do whatever you want. But remember, I can and will report every single one of your and your mother's actions to the authorities." My words made him choke, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like he was about to hit me, but instead, he slammed his fist on the table again and stormed out, the front door crashing shut behind him. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. I knew they wouldn't stop, but I also knew I had no other choice but to fight back. I remembered what my own mother used to tell me. A daughter doesn't get married to become a slave. If they disrespect you, you have to stand up and protect yourself. Never let anyone take what is rightfully yours. Her words were like a guiding light. I knew I had to be prepared. The next day, I discreetly went to a private law office. I explained the entire situation, from the verbal abuse and vandalism to the illegal lockout. The lawyer listened intently, then nodded. "Clara, you have solid grounds to protect your rights, but you need to be patient and gather more evidence. The more, the better." I nodded, feeling like I had finally found an anchor. When I got home, I found Ethan and Brenda talking. The moment they saw me, they fell silent, their eyes filled with suspicion. I knew they were plotting something. This house was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, devoid of affection, filled only with strife. And I, the one they had once seen as weak, had now become an opponent they had to reckon with. That night, as I sat at my desk, the yellow lamp casting a long shadow on the wall, I made a promise to myself. "Ethan, Brenda, you chose to make me your enemy. Now I will show you that once I stand up, I will never back down." And I knew the real war was just beginning. From the day I decided to seek legal counsel, I had a clear plan, not just to defend, but to counterattack. I knew Ethan and Brenda wouldn't back down. With each passing day, their vindictiveness became more apparent. They wanted to corner me, to break me. But I was no longer the naive, fragile bride who had first walked into this house. I memorized every action, every word, preparing to turn it all into evidence. The next day, as I came home from work, I saw a group of neighbors clustered in front of my house, whispering among themselves. I hurried inside to find Brenda holding court in the living room with a few of the more gossipy neighbors. The moment she saw me, she raised her voice dramatically. "See, everyone, look at me. I'm old, living in my own son's house, and I'm being tormented and cursed by my daughter-in-law, who wants to throw me out on the street. Is a thankless woman like this fit to be a wife in any family?" The neighbors looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and judgment. A few who were closer to Brenda chimed in. "Oh, my. Daughters-in-law these days are so fierce. You've really suffered, Brenda." I stood there for a second, then calmly replied, my voice clear and steady. "Everyone, you've heard her side of the story. But you should also see the truth. This house is in my name. It was a legacy left to me by my mother. I have never cursed or mistreated anyone. But for a long time, I have been treated like an unwelcome guest in my own home." There was a brief silence. A few neighbors looked at me with a flicker of sympathy, but Brenda wouldn't stop. She slapped her thigh for emphasis. "A daughter-in-law who dares to talk back like that in front of everyone. You are all my witnesses. See how she disrespects her mother-in-law." I didn't argue further. I simply took out my phone and discreetly started a voice recording. I knew that later on, these very words would become useful evidence. That night, when it was just the three of us, Ethan exploded. He stormed into my room, yelling, "You're really something else, aren't you? Daring to talk back to my mother in front of the neighbors. Are you trying to smear her name?" I looked him straight in the eye. I was only speaking the truth. If the truth embarrasses you, that's a reflection of your and your mother's actions, not mine. Ethan slammed his hand on the desk, his voice a low growl. "You just wait. I'll make this entire neighborhood believe you're a cruel, heartless monster. You won't be able to hold your head up again." I pressed my lips together, my heart aching, but I didn't tremble. I understood that if they chose the path of public humiliation, I had to stand my ground even more firmly. A few days later, just as Ethan had threatened, rumors began to spread throughout the neighborhood. Some said I was disrespectful. Others claimed I was greedy and trying to steal my husband's house. Every time I stepped outside, I felt the probing stares and heard the whispers behind my back. There were moments I wanted to break down and cry, but I reminded myself that if I crumbled now, I would lose everything. "Stand tall, Clara." I decided to install small security cameras in the living room and kitchen without telling anyone. Whenever Brenda launched into one of her tirades, I would pretend to ignore her, but inwardly, I was documenting every word she said, and then my opportunity came. One day, Brenda flew into a rage simply because I had cooked dinner a little later than usual. She stormed into the kitchen, pointed her finger in my face, and screamed, "You are a God-forsaken daughter-in-law. If you're so tough, then kick us out. I dare you. I will make your life a living hell." Her venomous words echoed through the kitchen, all perfectly captured by the tiny camera. I breathed a silent sigh of relief. I finally had concrete proof. That evening, Ethan and his mother performed their usual drama. "She wept," he yelled, and I just sat there, unresponsive. When they had exhausted their insults, I calmly took out my phone and played the video I had just recorded. The image of Brenda, spewing curses at me, appeared on the screen, her voice crystal clear. Ethan was speechless. Brenda's face turned pale. I looked at them both, my voice cold. "This is just a small sample. If you continue, I will present all of it in court. Then, it won't just be the neighbors, but the whole world who will know who is truly cruel and who is the liar." Brenda trembled but still managed to shriek, "How dare you, Clara? How dare you defy me?" Ethan clenched his fists, but fear was now visible in his eyes. They never imagined I would have evidence. From that day on, they were more cautious, but their hatred only festered, becoming more dangerous. I knew there would be other, more insidious attacks. And I was right. Just a few days later, I came home from work to find a strange envelope on my doorstep. It was an anonymous complaint sent to my workplace, alleging that I was disrespectful, promiscuous, and greedy, attempting to seize family assets. I held the letter, my hands shaking, a bitter taste in my mouth. This was clearly the work of Ethan and Brenda. That night, I sat in my room, my face in my hands, hot tears streaming down my cheeks. I was exhausted and hurt, but then, a fire ignited within me. I cannot let them destroy my career too, I told myself. I have to be stronger. I immediately had my lawyer draft a formal response, attaching the video evidence. I also scheduled a private meeting with my supervisor to explain the situation. Thankfully, my boss was a reasonable person. After watching the clip of Brenda's verbal abuse, he nodded. "Don't worry, Clara. We won't let an anonymous letter ruin the years of hard work you've put into this company." I felt a wave of relief, but I also saw with chilling clarity the depths of their malice. They didn't just want my house, they wanted to push me into a corner, to leave me with absolutely nothing. That night, I sat in front of the mirror, looking at my own reflection. My eyes were red-rimmed, but fiercely bright. I whispered, "Ethan, Brenda, you have underestimated me for too long. From now on, you will not break me. I will show you just how strong a woman can be when she's pushed to the wall." The house was quiet, but within me, the fire of defiance burned brighter than ever. I knew this was only the beginning of a relentless fight. After the counter-move with the video recording, I thought that Ethan and Brenda would at least hesitate, but I was wrong. They were quiet for a short while, like a wounded animal retreating into the shadows, only to re-emerge with claws sharper than before. I knew they would never accept defeat, and just as I suspected, a new storm was on the horizon. One weekend afternoon, I returned from work to find my house swarmed with people. The noise spilled out into the street. I rushed inside and was stunned to see the living room packed with Ethan's relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, even some distant relations I barely knew. They were all sitting there, their faces grim and accusatory. In the center sat Brenda, looking regal and aggrieved. Ethan stood behind her, his arms crossed, a predatory glint in his eye. The moment she saw me, Brenda's voice boomed, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. "There, everyone, you are my witnesses. What kind of daughter-in-law dares to kick her mother-in-law out of the house? Who dares to disrespect her husband's family? I'm an old woman, and I have to endure this. What could be more humiliating?" A murmur went through the room. Numerous pairs of eyes turned on me, filled with reproach. A middle-aged man, Ethan's uncle, stood up and pointed a finger at me. "Clara, what have you been doing to cause this entire family to assemble? A wife should be patient and compromising. No one disrespects their mother-in-law like this. You should also remember that you live in this house peacefully, thanks to the good fortune of your husband's ancestors." My blood boiled, but I kept my voice calm. "Uncle, this house is property my mother left to me. The deed is in my name. I have never mistreated or tried to evict anyone. I simply refuse to be perpetually disrespected and insulted." Another woman, Ethan's aunt, interjected. "You make it sound so noble. Your husband's home is his home, and a daughter-in-law must know her place. A woman who can't endure will never keep her family together." Her words were like salt in an open wound. I looked around the crowded room, at all the eyes fixed on me, and felt utterly alone. A sense of isolation settled over me like a thick fog. But instead of fear, a strange lucidity took hold. I smiled, a small, knowing smile that made the room fall silent for a beat. Then, I spoke slowly. "You all came here to blame me. But has anyone here ever lived with Ethan and his mother? Has anyone witnessed the daily criticism I endure? The contempt in every meal, every sigh? If you are so quick to judge based on one side of the story, is that truly fair?" The room was quiet for a few seconds, but then Brenda started crying again, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, God, I'm old. I just want to live peacefully with my son, and she treats me like a parasite. Brothers, sisters, have you ever seen a daughter-in-law as cruel as this?" Her tears softened many hearts in the room. An uncle shook his head. "Clara, you are in the wrong. No matter what, she is your mother-in-law, an elder. You must be patient. Even if the house is in your name, It's where Ethan and his mother live. How could you say such harsh things? I wanted to laugh bitterly. So, in their eyes, a daughter-in-law was an outsider. A mother-in-law's tears were all it took to turn me into the villain. I took a deep breath. If that is what you all choose to believe, I can't stop you. But I have enough evidence to prove how I've been treated. If necessary, I will present it all in court for everyone to see. Then, we will all know who is right, who is wrong, and who has been unjust. The room erupted in noise. Ethan, furious, strode toward me, pointing directly in my face. How dare you, Clara? You dare to slander my mother in front of our entire family. Who do you think will believe you? I met his gaze, my eyes like ice. I don't need anyone to believe me. I only need the truth. The tension was palpable. A few relatives began to look hesitant, avoiding my eyes. Clearly, my firmness had unsettled them. They had expected a meek, weak-willed daughter-in-law, not someone who could face down the entire family without flinching. The family meeting ended in chaos. Some continued to blame me, others avoided me, but none of them could make me bow my head. When the room finally cleared, leaving just the three of us, Brenda shot me a hateful look. You're a tough one, aren't you? Daring to defy the whole family. I swear, I will ruin you. Ethan ground his teeth and whispered, You will regret today. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but held my ground. If I am to regret defending my honor and my rightful property, then I accept that. That night, I sat in my room, my heart heavy but also filled with a defiant pride. I knew they had more tricks up their sleeves, but I also knew that the more I was challenged, the stronger I had to be. A few days later, as expected, a new scheme unfolded. I came home from work to see a group of women standing in front of my gate, holding signs and posters. They read, Give the house back to your mother-in-law, and disrespectful daughter-in-law get out. I froze. This was clearly a stunt organized by Ethan and Brenda, who had hired people to publicly shame and pressure me. Neighbors gathered to watch, many taking pictures and videos. I walked out to face the crowd, my voice calm but sharp. Do you people shouting out here have any proof for your claims? This house is legally in my name. If you continue to cause a disturbance, I will call the police. A few of them hesitated, but they continued their half-hearted shouting. I took out my phone and dialed 911. Just 10 minutes later, officers arrived and dispersed the crowd. From inside the house, Brenda watched, her face white with rage. Ethan muttered a curse and slammed the door shut. That evening, I sat at my desk, the light casting a warm glow, my mind in turmoil. I understood this was no longer just a family dispute. It had become a real war. On one side was me, a solitary woman. On the other was Ethan, his mother, and the backing of their family. But I knew I could not afford to retreat. I whispered a promise to myself. Even if the whole world is against me, I will stand firm. Because if I lose everything, my dignity, and my mother's home. In my eyes, at that moment, the flame of defiance burned brighter than ever. After the incident with the hired protesters, I thought Ethan and Brenda might become less reckless. But I had underestimated the depths of their malice and their determination to destroy me. When reason is clouded by greed and hatred, people are capable of anything, regardless of the consequences. This time, they didn't just want to slander me. They wanted to use the law to crush me with blatant lies. One afternoon, I received a call from the local police department. The officer's voice was serious. Ma'am, this is Officer Davis. We need you to come down to the station. Someone has filed a complaint against you for assault and abuse of your mother-in-law. I stood there, stunned, my ears ringing. This was clearly the new play orchestrated by Ethan and Brenda. When I got home that evening, Brenda was sitting in the living room, looking frail, but with a triumphant glint in her eyes. The moment she saw me, she clutched her chest and began to moan. Oh, the misery. I'm being beaten and tormented by my own daughter-in-law. It's a fate worse than death, but thank God for justice. The police have the complaint now. Let's see how arrogant you can be for much longer. Ethan stood nearby, leaning against a chair with his arms crossed, a cold smirk on his lips. Clara, you think you're so smart, don't you? but the law doesn't tolerate disrespectful women like you. You'd better get ready for jail time." I looked at them, my heart aching, but I maintained a cold composure. "If I truly laid a hand on her," I said slowly, "then present your evidence. But if this is slander, I will make sure you both face the legal consequences." At this, Brenda shot up, pulling up her sleeve to reveal several dark bruises on her arm. I froze for a second. She began to wail, "Everyone, look! These are the marks from my daughter-in-law beating me." I took a deep breath and realized the truth. Those bruises weren't from me. She had clearly inflicted them on herself. A person capable of doing anything, including self-harm, just to bring someone else down. I looked her straight in the eye, unflinching. "I have never laid a finger on you. You created those bruises yourself. I have nothing to fear. I will face the police, and I believe the truth will prevail." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, humiliation, and a creeping fear. I knew the truth was on my side, but I also knew that such a heinous accusation, if not thoroughly debunked, could destroy my reputation and my career. I thought of my mother and the house she left me. I told myself not to show weakness, not to shed a tear. This was the time to be stronger than ever. The next day, I walked into the police station. Ethan and Brenda were already there. She sat looking miserable, her eyes red and swollen, her hand trembling as she cradled her bruised arm. Ethan appeared righteous and indignant. "Officers, you see this? My mother is an elderly woman, and she's being abused by her daughter-in-law like this. Is this acceptable? She even threatened to kick us out of our home." I sat down, calmly took out my phone, and played the video from the camera I had installed. It clearly showed Brenda, alone in the room, deliberately hitting her arm against the edge of a table and then moaning in pain. I let the video play to the end. "This is the truth," I said quietly. "I never touched her. Those bruises were self-inflicted. I would like to file a formal complaint for filing a false police report." The room fell silent. The officer frowned, looking from the video to Ethan and Brenda. "If this video is authentic, this constitutes a false report. We will investigate further, but I'm warning you both against fabricating stories and causing public disturbances." Brenda's face went pale. She stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Ethan ground his teeth, his eyes shooting daggers at me. I knew this countermove had made them more vindictive than ever. As we left the station, Ethan leaned in close and whispered, his voice seething, "You're good, Clara. You want to play this game to the end? Fine. Just you wait. This isn't over." I walked away, my body still trembling but my steps firm with resolve. I understood that every day was a new battle, and they wouldn't stop until one of us was completely defeated. That night, I sat alone in my room, the yellow light illuminating my exhausted face. I wondered where I had gone wrong. All I ever wanted was a home, a family. Why had it turned into a battlefield? But then I remembered the moment Ethan had screamed at me, "My mother comes first. If you can't live with it, then get out." And in that instant, I knew. I no longer had a family here. What I needed to protect now wasn't a marriage, but my honor, my mother's house, and my own self-respect. In the following days, I became even more cautious. I installed more cameras around the house, meticulously saving all the footage. I gathered evidence day by day, hour by hour. I knew this war wasn't over, and to win, I had to turn every wicked deed they committed into evidence against them. Then, one rainy night, just as I had drifted off to sleep, I was jolted awake by a loud banging on the door. I sat up, my heart pounding. Outside, Brenda's voice was shrieking through the storm. "Neighbors, help, come and see. She's locked me in the house. She's trying to kill me." I froze, then scrambled to the door. There she was, standing in the middle of the yard, her clothes disheveled, her hair a mess, her face a mask of feigned terror. Neighbors began to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Ethan suddenly appeared from nowhere, feigning panic. "Mom, I'm here. Are you okay?" Then he turned to me and roared, "Are you even human, Clara? Are you trying to murder my mother?" I stood there, the cold rain pouring down on my face, my heart twisting in agony. I knew this was another one of their staged dramas. But I also knew that my cameras had recorded everything. And this time, I would not be silent. I stepped onto the porch, looked at the crowd of onlookers, and my voice rang out, clear and sharp, above the sound of the rain. You all want to know the truth? Tomorrow, I will show you everything. The look in my eyes at that moment made many of them pause, and I knew the final showdown was very, very near. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, I had everything prepared. The video clips from the cameras, the audio recordings, all of it backed up on multiple devices. I knew today's battle wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about putting a definitive end to the lies and slander that Brenda and Ethan had spread everywhere. I was done hiding, done being silent. I had to confront them, to show the entire neighborhood and our extended family the truth. The moment I opened my front door, I saw people already milling about on the street. News of the daughter-in-law abusing her mother-in-law incident had spread like wildfire. Curious neighbors had gathered in droves. I took a deep breath, carried a small portable speaker out to the yard, and connected it to my phone. Brenda stood on the porch, a look of triumph on her face. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips, as if waiting for the climax of the drama he had directed to finally crush me. But they had no idea that today, I was the one holding the script. I pressed play. Brenda's voice, captured on an audio recording, boomed from the speaker. You are a godforsaken daughter-in-law. I will make your life a living hell. Then came the videos. Clip after clip played for everyone to see. Brenda deliberately hitting her arm on the table to create bruises. Brenda spewing venom at me in the kitchen. Brenda putting on a tearful, fake performance for the neighbors. The images were clear. The voices were undeniable. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The whispers started immediately. Oh my God, she made it all up. One woman, who had always believed Brenda, exclaimed. Another man shook his head. You just never know, do you? Who would have thought? Brenda's face turned ashen. She stammered, No, that's not. She set me up. Ethan rushed forward, shouting, It's fake! All of it is fake! How dare you slander my mother? I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. This is the truth. If you believe it's fake, I am more than willing to submit all of it to the police for forensic analysis. Then we'll see who's lying. A heavy silence fell over the yard. Some neighbors started looking at Brenda with suspicion. This time, the whispers were not directed at me, but at her. Brenda trembled and collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. But this time, her tears held no power. Ethan, scowling, pulled his mother to her feet and yelled, That's enough. She orchestrated all of this. No matter what, I believe my mother. He then dragged Brenda inside, slamming the door on the stunned faces of their audience. I stood alone in the yard, puddles from last night's rain still at my feet. I knew I had won a major victory, but I had also provoked the full fury of Ethan and Brenda. And just as I expected, they wouldn't let it go. That afternoon, when I returned from work, a strange envelope was handed to me. Inside were photographs of me with a male colleague, Mark, a man who often collaborated with me on projects. The photos were taken secretly and cleverly edited to create a misleading narrative. A line of crude handwriting was scrawled at the bottom, cheating wife having an affair with a coworker. A disgrace. I stood there, frozen. This was their new, vicious tactic. When they couldn't defeat me with the mother-in-law drama, they would try to ruin me with accusations against my character and honor. That evening, Ethan came home and threw the photos in my face. You filthy woman, he screamed. Not only disrespectful, but an adulterer too. Are you trying to humiliate me completely? I picked up the photos, looked at each one calmly, and then looked up at him. These are fake. You and your mother created them. Mark and I are just colleagues. If you had any sense left, you would see that. But Ethan wasn't listening. He lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders, his eyes blazing. I told you I would make you lose everything. Your honor, your job, your family, you'll have nothing left. Brenda emerged from her room, her voice sharp as a razor. You want to play the evidence game? Fine. We'll let the world know what kind of woman you really are. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I knew that a hysterical reaction was exactly what they wanted. Instead, I spoke slowly, each word a carefully placed cut. Go ahead, release whatever you want. The police will find out who edited these photos, who fabricated this story. I am not afraid. That night, again, I couldn't sleep. I sat in front of the mirror, looking at my own reflection, dark circles under my eyes, but a determined glint within them. I knew this attack wasn't just on my personal honor, but on my career, my livelihood. If this rumor of an affair spread, I could lose everything. The very next morning, I took the photos to my lawyer. He examined them carefully and nodded. Don't worry, Clara. These are clearly doctored. The editing marks are obvious. I'll have a digital forensics expert confirm it. But you need to prepare yourself. When they stoop to this level, they'll spread it far and wide to ruin your reputation before the truth comes out. I nodded, my heart heavy but my spirit unbroken. I understood this was a new level of escalation, and if I wasn't strong enough, I would be drowned by it. That afternoon, just as the lawyer predicted, the photos appeared on social media, shared in local community groups online. The vicious comments poured in. What a horrible woman. No wonder her husband doesn't love her. She deserves to be kicked out. I sat in front of my phone, reading every word, each one a small sting, but I didn't break. I saved screenshots of everything, adding it to my mountain of evidence. I knew that, in the end, the truth would win. As night fell, I stepped out onto the porch, the cool air on my face. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered, Mom, I've come this far. I won't back down. I will protect your house, and I will protect my honor, even if I have to face the entire world. In the darkness, my eyes shone with a new, unshakable resolve. I knew the storm wasn't over, but the more they pushed me, the stronger I would become, and this time, I was ready for whatever devastating blow they would throw at me next. The rumor of the affair spread like a wildfire. Those doctored photos were passed around, whispered about in coffee shops, on neighborhood streets, and even at my own workplace. Everywhere I went, I felt the speculative stares, the hushed whispers that were just loud enough to feel like daggers. That morning, when I walked into the office, I noticed my colleagues subtly avoiding my gaze. Sarah, my closest friend at work, came over and gently squeezed my hand. Clara, you have to be careful, she whispered. The rumor is all over the place. The boss has heard about it. I know you're not that kind of person, but you have to find a way to prove it, or else. I nodded, forcing a smile, though my stomach was in knots. When I entered a meeting later, the glances from a few coworkers felt like needles. I could clearly hear someone whisper behind me, "That's her. They say she's cheating on her husband with someone from the office." The words made my face flush with heat, but I gritted my teeth and said nothing. After work, my boss called me into his office. He looked at me sternly. Clara, you are an excellent employee, and we value your contributions. However, this private matter is starting to seriously affect the company's image. You need to clear this up quickly, or we will be forced to consider disciplinary action. I lowered my head, my voice catching in my throat. I understand, sir. I will prove the truth as soon as possible. Walking out of his office, my legs felt like lead. It was terrifying how a single rumor, a few fake photos, could be enough to destroy the career and reputation I had worked so hard to build. I pictured Ethan's triumphant face, Brenda's malevolent eyes. They had calculated every step, determined to push me into a bottomless pit. That night, I sat silently in my room, the yellow light casting a glow on my trembling hands. I looked at the fake photos, my heart constricting. Then, I remembered my lawyer's words. To fight back, I needed forensic evidence, and I needed to expose the truth publicly. I couldn't just suffer in silence. The very next morning, I took the photos to a digital forensics lab. After several hours, the report was ready. It confirmed unequivocally that the photos showed clear signs of crude digital manipulation and editing. The proof was concrete. Holding the report, I finally let the tears fall, not of sadness but of relief. It was a single ray of light in the suffocating darkness. But I didn't stop there. I decided I had to do something bigger, to reveal everything not just to my company, but to the neighbors, the relatives, and to Ethan and Brenda themselves. I announced a meeting at my house for the upcoming weekend, under the pretense of explaining the truth. The news spread quickly. The whole neighborhood was buzzing. Some were curious, some were scornful, some were skeptical. I didn't care. I knew this was my one chance to turn the tables. On the day of the meeting, my yard was packed. Ethan and Brenda were there, their faces grim, but their eyes glinting with defiance. They thought I was digging my own grave. I walked into the center of the yard, holding the forensic report and a small speaker. My voice rang out, clear and steady. Everyone has heard the rumor that I'm having an affair. Today, I want to show you the truth. This is a forensic report from a digital analysis lab. It proves that those photos were fake, that they were crudely edited. I am innocent. And this, I continued, is evidence of what Ethan and his mother have done to me. I played a video showing Brenda hiring the women to protest and curse at me. I played the audio recording of her plotting to fabricate stories. And finally, I held up the forensic report for all to see. The yard erupted in an uproar. Oh my God, it was all a setup. That poor woman, Clara. I can't believe Ethan and his mother would do something so despicable. Brenda's face went white. She started to wail. No, she made it all up. Don't believe her. But this time, her tears only made the crowd more suspicious. Ethan stood there, grinding his teeth, his face flushed with rage, but he was speechless. I looked directly at them, my voice firm. I don't want anyone's pity. I just want to protect my honor and the house my mother left me. If anyone still has doubts, I am prepared to involve the police. I am not afraid of the truth. The tide of public opinion turned decisively in my favor. Many neighbors nodded in understanding, their eyes filled with sympathy. A few of Ethan's relatives quietly slipped away, unable to meet my gaze. This victory was mine, but I knew Brenda and Ethan wouldn't stop. And sure enough, that very evening, after everyone had left, Ethan stormed into my room, his eyes bloodshot. You think you've won? You're wrong, Clara. You will pay a much higher price for this. I will show you what it means to lose everything. I looked at him, my eyes cold. I have nothing left to lose but my honor. And Ethan, you are the one who is about to lose everything. In that moment, I knew the war was not over. They would come back with something even more vicious. But I also knew I was strong enough to face it. And I was already preparing my next move, a move that would shift the entire dynamic, a move that Ethan and Brenda would never see coming. That night, I opened my laptop and emailed all the evidence I had, the videos, the recordings, the forensic reports to my lawyer, and to the local police department. I also wrote a long letter detailing the entire sequence of events, sealed it, and locked it in my desk. I knew it was time for this battle to move from a family dispute to a public, legal fight. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, my eyes bright in the lamplight. I whispered, Ethan, Brenda, you chose this path, and I will follow it to the very end. I could feel the real storm gathering, but this time, I was no longer afraid. I was ready. After the public revelation, I thought that with public opinion on my side, Ethan and Brenda would be more cautious. I was wrong. Their silence wasn't surrender. It was the quiet before they unleashed their most devastating attack. It was a move that, if I wasn't prepared, could have cost me everything. One morning, just as I was leaving for work, two formally dressed individuals knocked on my door. They identified themselves as process servers from the county court and handed me a thick file. It was a lawsuit filed by Ethan and Brenda. They were demanding a division of marital assets, including my house, on the grounds that it was the marital home and therefore subject to division. I was stunned. They had found a legal loophole, a way to try and turn my inheritance, a premarital asset, into shared property they could claim. The petition stated clearly, although the property is deeded to Clara Miller, it was used as the primary marital residence throughout the marriage, and therefore, both parties have an equitable interest. We demand the property be sold and the proceeds divided, or that Clara Miller be ordered to vacate. I sank into a chair, my heart pounding erratically. Ethan's words from long ago echoed in my mind. My mother comes first. If you can't live with it, then get out. It became chillingly clear that from the very beginning, He had seen me as nothing more than an obstacle to him and his mother taking everything. That afternoon, I rushed to my lawyer's office. He reviewed the lawsuit, his brow furrowed. "This is a dirty trick, but it's not foolproof," he said. "You have to prove conclusively that the house was your separate property, inherited from your mother before the marriage. The deed in your name is a huge advantage, but we need stronger evidence, like a will or witnesses." My heart sank. My mother had passed away years ago, leaving me only the deed. There was no formal will. As for witnesses, there were a few old neighbors from my childhood town, but would they be willing to testify in court? I felt like I was staring into a dark abyss. When I returned home, Ethan was sitting in the living room, his face like stone. He saw me and smirked. "You think you've won? The court will decide. I'm not going to let you keep this house." Brenda, sitting beside him, added in a shrill voice, "You think your sharp tongue will save you? Just wait until you're in court. You'll see what it's like to be left with nothing." I didn't respond. I walked straight to my room, but I couldn't sleep that night. I thought of my mother, of every drop of sweat she had shed to afford this house. I couldn't let her memory be insulted like this. I had to protect her legacy at all costs. The next day, I drove back to my old hometown and sought out the neighbors who had lived next to my mother. I went from door to door, explaining my situation. A few of them nodded readily. "Of course, we'll testify. We all knew that house was your mother's, and she always said she was leaving it to you. We'll tell the judge the truth." I was so grateful I could barely speak, tears welling in my eyes. I also dug through old boxes, finding property tax receipts and utility bills from years ago, all in my mother's name and later, mine. I compiled everything into a file, my last line of defense. Meanwhile, Ethan and Brenda were spreading their own narrative, telling relatives that I was greedy, trying to hoard assets and disrespecting my husband. Someone even texted me, "Clara, you're still married. Why can't you just compromise? It's a big house. What's the harm in giving Ethan half?" I gritted my teeth and didn't reply. I knew that if I gave in now, I would lose everything. Patience with the greedy only encourages them to take more. The day of the court hearing arrived. I walked into the courtroom, my heart pounding, but my face was a mask of calm. Across the room, Ethan sat in a crisp shirt, a look of confidence on his face. Brenda was beside him, playing the part of the frail, tearful victim. In front of the judge, they painted me as a monster, disrespectful, greedy, claiming the house was a shared investment. When it was my turn, I stood up, my voice steady. "Your Honor, this house is the inheritance left to me by my late mother, Helen Davis, before I was ever married. I have all the paperwork and witnesses to confirm this. I never agreed to share ownership of this property with anyone." I presented my file, the deed, the old tax records, the bills, and the list of witnesses. A few of my old neighbors were called to testify. They stated clearly that the house had belonged to my mother and was intended solely for her only daughter, Clara. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew tense. Ethan tried to argue, and Brenda started wailing about her ungrateful daughter-in-law, but this time, her tears had lost their effect. The judge reviewed the evidence and announced the hearing would be postponed, pending further verification. But I knew, at least for now, I had a fighting chance. On the way out, Ethan walked up beside me and hissed, "You're clever, but I swear, if I don't get this house, I'll make you lose something far more precious." A chill went down my spine. His eyes held not just hatred, but a dangerous recklessness. That night, I sat at my desk, looking at the thick legal file. I knew this fight was far from over, and that my opponent was not just greedy, but capable of anything. I whispered to myself, "Ethan, Brenda, the more desperate you become, the more I know I cannot show any weakness. I will see this through to the end." The lamp cast a warm glow on my face, illuminating my determined eyes. I knew the battle was entering its most intense phase, and I braced myself for the most terrible blow they had yet to deliver. After the first court hearing, when the judge postponed the decision for further verification, I felt a glimmer of hope but couldn't let my guard down. I knew Ethan and Brenda wouldn't sit idly by. They would find some way to turn the tables. But I never imagined their next move would be so vile, so depraved, that it nearly sent me over the edge. A week later, I received a notice from the court. They had received new evidence from Ethan's side. I read the document, and the world went dark. It was a handwritten letter, in a script that looked exactly like my mother's. The crucial line read, "I leave this house to my daughter, Clara, and my son-in-law, Ethan, to be their shared home." My entire body went cold. They had forged my mother's will. That evening, Ethan came home and slammed the forged document on the table, his voice dripping with triumph. "See this, Clara? Here's your proof. This house isn't just yours. Your own mother wanted me to have a share. You can't keep it all for yourself." Brenda clapped her hands, her voice shrill. "That's right. Your mother wasn't a stingy woman. She loved her son-in-law. She loved my son. That's why she left the house to both of you. You're the greedy one, making up stories about it being yours alone." I stared at the paper, my eyes burning. The handwriting was so similar to my mother's that it pained my heart. I remembered every curve of her script from when she was alive. At a quick glance, anyone would believe it was real. I choked back a sob, forcing myself to remain calm. This is a forgery. My mother never wrote this. I will have it expertized. Ethan just sneered. "Go ahead. When the results come back authentic, you'll have no choice but to get on your knees and apologize." That night, I held my head in my hands and cried. How could they be so cruel? Even after my mother was gone, they wouldn't let her rest in peace, fabricating lies to steal her final legacy. But through the despair, a fire of rage ignited within me. "Mom," I vowed silently, "I will not let them tarnish your name. I will prove the truth, no matter how hard it is." The next morning, I took the letter to a forensic document examiner. The days I spent waiting for the results felt like an eternity. Every night, I lay awake, my heart heavy with anxiety, terrified of an unfavorable outcome. I didn't believe my mother wrote it, but I knew that skilled forgers could be incredibly convincing. While I waited, Ethan and Brenda spread the news everywhere. Relatives called, whispering, "So Clara's mother did leave the house to Ethan too? If Clara was hiding that, she really is greedy." The neighbors were divided. One even said to my face, "If that letter is real, you've got no leg to stand on." I swallowed my anger and didn't argue. I knew words were useless now. I needed the expert's report. Finally, the day came. I opened the sealed envelope, my hands trembling. My vision blurred with tears as I read the conclusion. The document in question shows signs of simulation and forgery. The signature does not match the known handwriting samples of Helen Davis. A wave of relief washed over me, and I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. My mother's name was cleared. Her honor had not been stained by their dirty scheme. I clutched the report and whispered, "Mom, I protected you." But I knew I had to present this in court immediately, before the rumor they started could haunt me forever. On the day of the second hearing, the courtroom was packed. Ethan and Brenda walked in confidently, holding their forged will. I sat opposite them, my hand clutching the forensic report. The session began. Ethan stood up, his voice clear and confident. "Your Honor, this is the crucial piece of evidence that proves the house is a marital asset. I present it to the court." He handed the letter to the bailiff. Brenda began her performance, crying, "I'm an old woman. I just want peace. My daughter-in-law is thankless. She has no love for me. Only her own mother had the decency to think of me, leaving the house to both of them, but she's too greedy to admit it." A murmur went through the room. I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Your Honor, that document is a forgery. This is the report from a forensic document examiner, confirming that both the handwriting and the signature on that supposed will are fake. I request that this report be entered into the record and that charges be filed for perjury and fabricating evidence." The entire courtroom fell silent. The judge took the report, read it carefully, and nodded grimly. Ethan's face drained of color. Brenda stared, wide-eyed, in stunned disbelief. The judge's voice was stern. "If this report is accurate, the plaintiff has committed the serious offense of submitting fraudulent documents to the court. This is a criminal matter. We will be referring this to the district attorney's office for investigation." His words were like a hammer blow. Ethan clenched his fists, veins bulging on his forehead. Brenda slumped into her chair, her sobs now real and desperate. I looked at them, a mixture of pain and vindication in my heart. Pain that our marriage had come to this, but vindication that the truth had finally prevailed. When the hearing was over, I stepped outside and took a deep, cleansing breath of fresh air. But before I could relax, Ethan rushed toward me, whispering with venom, "You're good, Clara, but don't think this is over. I will make you kneel yet." I turned and looked him straight in the eye, my voice like ice. "Ethan, the more you hate, the more I know I was right. This house, this honor, I will defend them to the end, and you will pay the price for everything you've done." That night, I sat alone in the quiet house. I knew I had escaped a terrible trap, but I was certain Ethan and Brenda would unleash other, more desperate attacks. I whispered, "Mom, I won't give up. No matter what comes next, I will see this through." In the mirror, my eyes were bright and determined. I was no longer the weak daughter-in-law from years ago. I had become a woman, ready to face any wicked scheme to protect what was right. The court's decision to refer the forgery case to the district attorney was a major turning point. I thought that surely, facing criminal charges, Ethan and Brenda would finally back down. But I was wrong. A cornered animal is the most dangerous, and a person consumed by greed and hatred, when pushed to the brink, becomes truly insane. After that day, the atmosphere in the house became a ticking time bomb. Ethan no longer bothered to hide his animosity. Every time he passed me, his eyes burned with a raw hatred that seemed to want to incinerate me on the spot. Brenda stopped her, theatrical crying. She became unnervingly quiet, her eyes cold and calculating. I knew they were plotting something new, their final, desperate gambit. Sure enough, a few days later, I received a call from a detective. They needed me to come in for questioning. Someone had filed an anonymous tip, accusing me of embezzling funds from my company. I froze, my heart seizing in my chest. This was no longer about family matters. This was about my career, my freedom. If this accusation stuck, I could lose my job and even face prison. When I got home that night, Ethan was waiting in the living room. He saw me and smirked. "Well, Clara, think you can get out of this one? I told you, I will make you lose everything. No house, no husband, no job. Let's see how you survive then." Brenda sat beside him, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. "This is what you get for defying your husband and mother-in-law. You deserve it." I stood there, a wave of furious indignation washing over me. They didn't just want my house, they wanted to annihilate my entire life. But after the initial shock, a cold calm settled over me. I looked directly at Ethan, my voice unwavering. "You can invent as many stories as you want, but the truth cannot be hidden forever. The more evil you become, the less I will ever forgive you." That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I sat at my desk, meticulously going over every work document, every financial report, every number that had ever passed through my hands. I had to prove my absolute innocence. I called Sarah, my trusted colleague, and asked for her help in double-checking all the records. After a moment of stunned silence, she said, "I believe you, Clara. Let's figure this out together." The next day, I walked into the police station. Ethan was already there, looking completely at ease, as if he was certain of my downfall. The detective placed a file in front of me. Inside were expertly forged documents, invoices, transfer slips with signatures, and company stamps that looked identical to the real ones, all pointing to me embezzling a large sum of money. My body went cold. I knew this was Ethan's doing, but looking at the documents, I understood why anyone would believe them. Without proof, I could be facing a felony charge. I took a deep breath, marshaling all my composure. "Detectives, all of these documents are forgeries. I request a full forensic examination. I also have internal company records and server logs that will prove I had no involvement with these transactions." They nodded and took the file for analysis. I walked out of the station, my legs feeling weak, but my heart was filled with a fierce determination. That night, I went through all my work emails, backing up everything to a flash drive. I even managed to obtain security footage from the office that showed me submitting my paperwork according to proper procedure, with no hint of tampering. I sent everything to my lawyer immediately. The days spent waiting for the forensic results were agonizing. During that time, Ethan and Brenda were relentless. They spread the rumor everywhere. Clara is going to jail for embezzlement. She got fired. A wicked woman like her gets what she deserves. Every time I went outside, I heard the whispers, felt the judgmental stares. It was painful, humiliating, but I gritted my teeth and kept my head held high. Then the day came. The forensic report confirmed that every single document used against me was a forgery. The signatures were copied, and the company stamps were fakes. I was exonerated. When I heard the news, I burst into tears right there in the detective's office. Tears not of weakness, but of overwhelming relief that justice had finally, once again, prevailed. But I knew I couldn't stop there. I didn't just need to be cleared. I needed to make Ethan and Brenda pay for what they had done. I immediately instructed my lawyer to press charges for slander, forgery, and filing a false police report with the intent to ruin my reputation. The authorities took my case seriously and opened a full investigation into their actions. When I returned home, Ethan was waiting at the door. Seeing me, he became enraged. "You're really something, Clara. You got out of this one, but don't think you're safe. I swear I will never let you live in peace." Brenda stood behind him, trembling. This time, she didn't cry. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. I walked past them without a word. I was no longer afraid. The ordeal had transformed me into someone stronger, more resolute. I whispered to myself, "Ethan, Brenda, you have gone too far. This time, I will let the law deal with you." That night, I sat by the window. A cold wind blew through the cracks, but inside me, a fire still burned. I knew this war was reaching its final stage, and though I was exhausted, I would see it through to the very end. Since the day the authorities officially opened an investigation into my counterclaims, the tension in the house became unbearable. Ethan was no longer shouting. He became quiet, withdrawn, his eyes like daggers hidden in the shadows. Brenda stopped her public weeping, and instead wore a permanent expression of grim, scheming resentment. I knew this silence wasn't a sign of surrender. It was them plotting something more terrifying. In the following days, the investigators repeatedly called all of us in for questioning. I provided everything: the videos, the audio recordings, the forensic reports on the fake photos, and the forged will. My lawyer told me, "Don't worry, Clara. The pieces are all falling into place. The truth is becoming clearer every day. Just be patient a little longer." But I couldn't feel at ease. I had lived with them for years. I knew Ethan's character. When cornered, he was capable of doing something reckless, regardless of the consequences. My fear soon became a horrifying reality. One late evening, I was cleaning up in the kitchen when I heard a strange clinking sound from the yard. I stepped outside, and my heart stopped. A dark, slick puddle of gasoline was spreading across the porch, the acrid smell hitting me like a physical blow. I looked up and saw Ethan holding a gas can, his eyes bloodshot, his voice a hoarse rasp. "You think you've won? If I lose everything, then you get nothing. Let's see you hold on to this house now." I was paralyzed with terror, my entire body going cold. Brenda stood behind him, trembling, but she still managed to shriek, "Do it, Ethan. Show her what happens when she defies us." "Ethan, you're insane," I screamed, my voice choked with fear. "This isn't just a house. This is about our lives. Are you trying to kill me?" He laughed, a guttural, broken sound. "Better than letting you walk away with everything. If I can't have it, neither can you." I was shaking, but in that instant, a strange strength surged through me. I lunged forward, grabbing for the lighter in his hand. We struggled violently. Chairs toppled, dishes crashed. The commotion brought the neighbors running. A few men rushed in, wrestled Ethan to the ground, and pried the gas can from his hands. Brenda screamed and collapsed onto the lawn. The police were there within minutes. They handcuffed Ethan and led him away, his face still contorted with rage. "You'll pay for this, Clara," he yelled. "You'll never know a day of peace." I collapsed onto the steps, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe the marriage I had once thought was my safe harbor had turned into this terrifying nightmare. The man I had once loved, the man I had entrusted my life to, was willing to burn everything to the ground out of pure greed and hatred. The neighbors were in an uproar. "You're lucky you still have the house, and your life." Their words were a blur. Had I pushed things too far? I wondered in a daze, but then I thought of my mother, of the years of humiliation, and I knew that everything I had done was to protect myself. The next day, the district attorney's office officially filed criminal charges against Ethan for forgery, slander, and attempted arson. Brenda, due to her poor health, was released on bail but placed under house arrest. Ethan was remanded in custody. I thought I would feel relieved, but I didn't. I sat in the now empty house, the faint, sickening smell of gasoline still clinging to the porch tiles, and my heart ached. This was the place where I had dreamed of a family. Now it was just a stage for a horror story. That night, I cried myself to sleep. I remembered the early days of our marriage, when Ethan held my hand and promised to love me forever. I remembered his gentle smile as we cooked our first meal together. Those memories were now shattered, tainted, like the gasoline stain on my porch. I realized then that when love loses respect, it becomes a prison, or even a hellfire. But in the darkness, I told myself I had to live, not just for me, but for my mother. I had to be strong, to show them that their evil schemes could not ultimately defeat a woman with resolve. A few days later, I received news that the investigation had uncovered evidence that Ethan had hired someone to create the forged documents, spread the rumors, and had even planned the arson as a way to destroy evidence. He was facing a severe sentence. When I heard the news, I breathed a sigh of relief, but the tears still fell. I didn't feel triumphant, only a profound sadness. All those years of marriage had dissolved into pure hatred. A mother, who should have been enjoying her later years, had instead sown so much wickedness that she had pushed her son, and herself, into the arms of the law. That afternoon, I stood on the porch, watching the late sun fall on the roof. I whispered, "Mom, I saved the house. But the price was so high. I promise, from now on, I will live differently. I will be strong, and I will be at peace." A gentle breeze carried the scent of the jasmine flowers my mother had planted in the corner of the yard. I closed my eyes and almost felt her hand on my shoulder, comforting me. But I also knew this wasn't necessarily the end, because when a person is consumed by hatred, they can be reckless until the very last moment, and I had to be prepared for whatever was to come next. After Ethan was arrested for attempted arson, and the forgery charges were formalized, my house grew quiet, but it was a heavy, oppressive quiet, the kind that precedes a final, devastating storm. I knew Ethan was not the type to give up. A man who would douse his own home in gasoline would surely find a way to continue his campaign of terror, even from behind bars. And I was right. One afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. A man's gravelly voice said, "Is this Clara? You'd better watch your back. Ethan sent us a message for you. Don't think you're safe just because he's locked up. If he wants to, he can make sure you never have another peaceful day in your life." Then he hung up. I stood there, frozen, my heart clenching with fear. That night, I tossed and turned, the man's cold threat echoing in my mind. I thought I had reached the end of this ordeal, but would I ever truly be safe? Then, I took a deep breath and told myself not to be afraid. Fear was a trap. I had to be stronger. Meanwhile, Brenda seemed to transform. She no longer cried or complained. She didn't even yell at me. She would sit silently in a corner for hours, her face gaunt, her eyes distant. Sometimes, I would hear her whispering to herself, "My son, it's my fault. I pushed him to this. I've ruined our family." Hearing this, my heart softened for a moment. As cruel as she had been, she was still a mother suffering over her son's imprisonment. But whenever I approached, she would turn away, her eyes hardening again, as if two people were warring within her, the remorseful mother and the bitter woman who refused to accept defeat. One afternoon, I came home to find the house in disarray. Furniture was moved, drawers were open, someone had been searching for something. I walked in to see Brenda sitting on the floor, clutching the old wooden box my mother had left me, the one containing her most precious letters and keepsakes. I gasped and rushed to take it back. Brenda shrieked, her voice filled with venom. "You think you can keep everything? You're greedy. You took it all. If I can't have anything, you won't have any peace either." We struggled over the box. It fell, and its contents scattered across the floor. Among them was an old, handwritten letter from my mother. Her familiar, shaky script read, "My dearest Clara, live with your head held high. Protect this house as you would protect my own spirit." I burst into tears, clutching the letter. "Brenda, please, stop," I sobbed. "This isn't about property anymore. This is my mother's dying wish. I can't let anyone defile it." Brenda looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Then she threw her head back and laughed, a harsh, chilling sound. "Her wish? You think I care? All I care about is my son winning. All I care about is you losing everything." I recoiled in horror. Just then, Brenda clutched her chest and collapsed. I rushed to her side in a panic. She was gasping for air, her face deathly pale. In that moment, all I saw was a frail, exhausted old woman, her strength completely gone. I called an ambulance and rushed her to the hospital. The doctor said she had severe heart failure brought on by prolonged stress. Seeing her lying in the hospital bed, I felt a pang of pity. She had wanted to destroy me, but now she was just a heartbroken mother, consumed by her own hatred. I took care of her at the hospital in the following days. She rarely spoke, only watching me with a complex expression of hatred and gratitude. Once, she whispered, "It's my fault, my son is where he is. But you'll never forgive me, will you?" I remained silent. My heart was a tangle of emotions, anger, pity, sorrow. But Ethan showed no such complexity. From jail, he continued to pull strings. One day, I came home to find my front door pried open and my belongings thrown about. Scrawled on the wall in red spray paint were the words, "You will pay." My blood ran cold. I knew this was a warning from the people Ethan had hired. I reported it to the police, who came and installed extra security cameras. But I knew that a man as desperate as Ethan would find other ways. I had to be prepared for anything. One night, as I sat by Brenda's hospital bed, she suddenly grabbed my hand, her eyes filled with tears. "Clara, please, save my son. He's lost his mind. He's going to destroy himself. If you have any humanity left, please, stop him." I was speechless. The woman who had tried to burn down my life was now begging me to save her son. I turned away, tears streaming down my face, and whispered, "I can't save him, Brenda. You're the one who planted this hatred. You're the one who nurtured this evil in him. It's too late now." Outside, the rain fell in sheets against the hospital window. I knew the storm wasn't over. Ethan was still out there, consumed by a burning vengeance, and Brenda, in her despair, might still cause one final, devastating event, an event that could change the outcome of this story forever. I clutched my mother's letter and whispered, "Mom, I'm almost at the end. I will be strong enough to finish this, no matter the cost." After all the turmoil, I was physically and emotionally drained. For years, I had endured disrespect and humiliation in my marriage, only to be dragged into a vortex of greed and hatred. I used to believe that if I just stayed quiet, if I was just patient, things would eventually get better. But the more I yielded, the more they took. Only now, with everything laid bare, did I understand that some things must be confronted, and some people must be allowed to face the consequences of their own actions before you can find peace. On the day of the final sentencing, the courtroom was packed. I sat pat, in a corner, my hands clenched, my mind a whirlwind of memories. My wedding day, the first time my mother-in-law insulted me. Ethan's roar of "my mother" comes first. The night he poured gasoline on our porch. It all played back like a slow-motion film. Ethan was led in, handcuffed. He was thinner, his eyes bloodshot and haunted. The arrogance and triumph were gone, replaced by the weary look of a defeated man, though a flicker of hatred still burned in his eyes. Brenda was helped to her seat, her hair now completely white, her face hollowed out, her expression vacant. The prosecutor read the final charges. Ethan was found guilty of forgery, slander, and making criminal threats. The attempted arson, though it caused no physical damage, was a serious felony. Brenda was found guilty as an accomplice for her role in the slander and for inciting her son's actions. As she heard the verdict, she trembled, clutched her chest, and sobbed, "Oh, my son, how did it come to this?" Ethan, however, ground his teeth and shouted, "It's all her fault. She's the reason for all of this. If it weren't for her, my mother and I wouldn't be in this mess." He turned and glared at me, his eyes blazing. I sat still, my own eyes wet, but my heart was calm. I was no longer afraid. The judge delivered the sentences. Ethan received a significant prison term. Brenda, due to her age and poor health, received a suspended sentence and probation, but was ordered to issue a public apology and pay damages for defamation. When the gavel fell, sealing their fates, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, not because I reveled in their punishment, but because the truth had finally been affirmed. Justice had been served. After the trial, I walked outside. The afternoon sun cast a warm, golden light. Neighbors had gathered. One of them nodded at me. "You've been through so much, honey. It's over now. Time to put the past behind you and live." I managed a small smile. "Yes. All I want now is peace." Brenda was being let out. She looked at me, her eyes a mixture of hatred, regret, and something that looked like a plea. I walked over to her and said quietly, "Brenda, what happened today is the price for your miscalculations. I don't resent you anymore. I just hope you can live out the rest of your days in peace." She shed a tear, but said nothing, simply bowing her head. Before being taken away, Ethan looked back one last time and yelled, "Clara, you remember this. I will hate you for the rest of my life." I stood my ground as tears rolled down my cheeks, but there was no more pain. I knew that from this day forward, he was just a part of my past, a past filled with blood and tears that I would have to learn to let go of. In the days that followed, the house returned to its natural quiet. There were no more arguments, no more insults, no more the suffocating smell of gasoline. I cleaned the house alone, scrubbing away every stain and crack left by the storm. Every corner held a memory, but instead of pain, I saw them as markers on a long, hard journey I had survived. I started tending to the flower beds my mother had loved so much. The scent of jasmine and gardenias once again filled the air, making me feel as if she were still here, watching over me, giving me strength. I returned to work, where my colleagues now looked at me with a new respect and admiration. My boss told me simply, "You handled yourself exceptionally well, both in your work and in facing that storm." I smiled, a genuine feeling of pride swelling within me. I had lost so much, but I had held on to what mattered most: my honor, my strength, and my mother's house. Some nights, I sit on the porch, watching the moonlight fall across the yard, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. I close my eyes and remember everything I went through, from being scorned and slandered to nearly losing it all. It feels like a terrible hurricane that has finally passed. I whisper to myself, "Mom, I did it. I protected our home, and I protected myself. Now, all I want is a peaceful life." The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about revenge or winning. It was about the pride a woman must have in herself. When faced with injustice and hatred, if you stay silent, if you don't stand firm, you will be trampled forever. But once you dare to stand up and fight for what is right, then no matter how painful the struggle, the truth will eventually come to light. I no longer wish for Ethan and Brenda to suffer. The sentences they received were the consequences of their own greed and malice. As for me, I choose to forgive them in my heart, so that I can move forward in peace. As time goes on, the house is once again filled with the sound of birds in the morning and the smell of cooking in the evening. I've started tutoring some of the neighborhood kids, and it fills my heart with warmth. Whenever someone brings up the past, I just smile and say, "That's all over now. What's important is that we appreciate the life we have today." My story ends here. It is a story scarred by many wounds and losses, but it ends with a newfound peace. I know that I am no longer the weak, timid daughter-in-law I once was. I am a woman who has grown, who has found her strength, and who dared to walk through a tempest to find the light. I look up at the sky and smile. A final thought echoes in my mind: never let hatred guide your path. Let humanity be your guide. Dear friends, if you found meaning in this story, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. It gives us the motivation to bring you more stories of the human spirit.